And according to Dogen, the great Zen master from Japan in the 12th, 13th century, um, the essence of the true transmission of the Buddha Dharma is taking refuge in the triple treasure, the three refuges. So Dogen was one of the greatest, teachers in the history of Zen, if not the greatest. Um, he studied the ocean of Buddha's teachings with impeccable thoroughness and care, Reb says, and out of boundless compassion for his students and for all future generations, he wrote the incomparable treasury of the true Dharma eyes, which we know as the Shobogenzo. And probably one of the most profound teachers in the history of the Buddha way. And so Reb says here, as Dogen approached death, he asks, what practice did he choose? Did he enter into the utmost serene and radiant concentration? Did he perhaps give his final transcendent exposition of the authentic Dharma? This is what he did do. On a long piece of white paper, he wrote 3 large black characters, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. He hung this paper on a pillar in his sick room. He died pretty young. I think he was in his early 50s, and I think he had cancer. In his great illness, he roused himself to walk around the pillar, and as he walked, he chanted, I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in Dharma, I take refuge in Sangha. So he brought his whole life energy forward to walk around these 3 jewels. He gave his whole life to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which means that he gave his whole life to all living beings. So this expression of the depth of his devotion is quite, moving to me. And I think sometimes Zen is thought of as not being real devotional, but I've always known that it's there, even though sometimes people think of it as Zen being more heavy on the wisdom side than the devotion side, but they really balance each other out. Just maybe the heart of Zen is expressed somewhat differently in different ways. But this devotion, of course, is very, to me, was very, very obvious and tangible. You could really feel it from Reb as his devotion to Dogen's teaching too. And he says here the expression to take refuge in the original Pali, it's translated as a shelter, protection, or sanctuary, some place of peace and safety. It also refers to the act of returning. The English word refuge seems quite appropriate because it carries a sense of both place and going back. It's synonymous with shelter and protection. It is anything to which you may turn to for help or relief. So to flee or to fly back, we take refuge in the triple treasure. We are flying back to our true home. So I know Kwang Roshi in his book, who was also, he was actually a senior disciple to Reb of Suzuki Roshi. And he wrote a book, I think it would be a good book for this group sometime, called No Beginning, No End. And he has a chapter in there saying, taking the backward step, which is also a big part of Dogen's teaching. So taking the backward step, and Dogen talked about it, I believe, in terms of, turning the light around and shining it on our true self. And because we're, pretty deeply conditioned to kind of look at the world outside, and our attention goes outside to the world out there that we think is separate from us, and we, we're tend to be afraid of it, especially in these times. We're afraid of the world. We're afraid of looking at our life force clearly. And so taking the backward step is, opening up to that realization that Suzuki Roshi talked about in one of the first chapters on breathing, is that the outer world is boundless and the inner world is also boundless. So when we take that backward step, we're shining the light back on our source. So our devotion is to the source of devotion, not to something outside us. And so Reb says that to take refuge in Buddha is to trust that you are Buddha. And he says, if our devotion is total, if we give our whole lives to being awake, then there will be a complete response. Awakening will be realized. If we devote our entire lives to the Dharma, then the teachings of awakening will come alive. And if we dedicate our whole being to Sangha, the community of all beings, then the community will appear in this world. So it's a process, like in doing zazen, of allowing our attention to fall back, relax back onto our essential being. And that way we can receive the nature of our Buddha nature, which Dogen said in so many different ways is our true identity. And it's the means by which we know our experience. In one of Dogen's teachings, he said that awareness or consciousness is that in which our experience arises. It's by which our experience is known in the sense of being aware of, experiencing, or witnessing. It arises in us, in our awareness or consciousness. And it also, this awareness of being present, is out of which all of our experience is made. So in other words, to take the backward step and to trust that we are Buddha is to realize that everything is Buddha and all beings share this being, and that our very virtue is our very being. So I was remembering a Tibetan monk that I met one time, and he told a group we were with about a prayer he used to do. He was in a monastery as a child, and there was a Buddhist prayer they did, praying to Buddha. And I remember the prayer, and it goes like this: Buddha, be in my head and in my thinking. Buddha, be in my mouth and in my speaking. Buddha, be in my ears and in my hearing. Buddha, be in my eyes and in my seeing. Buddha, be in my heart and in my loving and understanding. So I thought this was a very moving prayer, and it really kind of captures the devotion, I think, of, Dogen walking around the pillar and taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So it's like, it's almost like replace the separate self with Buddha. Fill my whole being with yourself, not Buddha outside, but we're speaking to infinite being. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, right? Existing right here and now, as we say. And a couple other that are coming to mind to me now of expressions of this total devotion. Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist monk, but studied Buddhism very intensely in his later years, and Zen in particular. And he had a phrase, a short prayer saying, Lord, you hear the cry of my heart because it is you that cries out from my heart. You are the love with which I love you. Another teacher that we studied in this group not too long ago, Joko Beck, I'm studying her book in another group. I think the last book she wrote is called Ordinary Wonder. And she says, as you embrace the suffering of life, the wonder shows up at the same time. They arise together. So I like that. And she has a little phrase here. She says, there's no way to get life exactly the way you want it because it's changing so rapidly. What's okay this week will be blown to bits the next week. Life doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. Life itself, the life force that lights us up, it's not perceivable or describable. It's not caught in ideas of what we think it is. There are just enormous energy fields changing at tremendous speeds. You can't really hope that it'll work the way you want it. You can only enjoy it. She had a pretty well-known quote along those lines saying, joy is what's happening minus our opinion of it. So we learn to offer all of our experience to this Buddha that we are. And Reb talks about that in his book, that we studied some years back on the paramitas, entering the mind of Buddha, saying, offer all of it, offer your whole life like Dogen did. And give away the joy. You can give away the joy, you can give away the suffering. Cultivate, patience and generosity and great compassion. And when we give it away, we can also give away that sense of being a separate body mind. And engage that question. In this chapter here, Reb mentions, this process of offering is sometimes called call and response. In other words, we offer our life to the Buddha and then we get the response that he mentioned in that last paragraph I read. So the question comes up, the Dogen addresses also. It's like, if we are Buddha, why do we have to practice? And so Reb says, to engage this question fully, really look deeply into this question. Assumptions will come up. Maybe we're assuming that we are this separate self when we ask that question. So, is it really true? Are we really a separate self? Buddha's teaching is that all beings together attain the way. And so part of Reb's teaching, a big part of it, is that we don't really, it's not that we aren't a human being, it's that the essence of our being is the essence of all beings. And so we really do everything together with all beings. So if we engage this question of practice from the viewpoint that's opening us to the possibility of being one with all beings, then our being begins to be informed and infused with the power of the nature of our Buddha nature, unconditional acceptance, compassion, ever-presence, boundless, and fearless. Thich Nhat Hanh had his own refuge chant, and I don't remember the whole chant, but one of the key phrases that I remember is that the world of suffering and discrimination is filled with the light of the rising sun. And the light of the rising sun is the light of our life force. It's the light that gives us life. We can't live without it. So if we engage these big questions with that total devotion, then we are taking refuge in the three jewels, in the triple treasure, and in the three refuges. So we can begin to, if we offer our whole life to this way, then we can, embrace suffering, learn to embrace suffering. And then we learn to feel embraced by all of life. We can open our heart to that possibility and dedicate our life to the welfare of all beings, and really, accept the support of the Sangha. I'm really grateful that we have this Sangha here, and it's flourishing. It's wonderful to see. So we have time for discussion. Thank you.
I had a question. In one of the paragraphs you read from Rev Anderson, you said the Sangha is the community of all beings. How do we scope the Sangha?
How do we scope the Sangha?
Where's the limits? When I think about Sangha, should I be thinking of the community of all beings? Which then I think of everyone as one.
Open to that possibility. That's the, that all beings together comprise the Buddha way, that we all equally possess. Possess isn't really it's not really the right word, but it's not, something we can really put limits on, but open to that vast wonder, We could say the wonder that Joko's talking about is wonderful, full of wonder, right? Engage that. And have anybody ever found a limit to our awareness, to space? Or the beginning or ending of time, Everything always happens here and now. And so we all possess equally the fullness of here now. So just open to the possibilities of limitless, boundless compassion and the nature of our being the possibility of ending suffering. That's the heart of Buddha's teaching.
Shikan, thank you for your talk. I really liked the phrase you linked with taking refuge in the three jewels, that backward step. When I thought about it, it makes so much sense. Because if you walk into a dark room with a little flashlight, I really can't see much when I focus the light on a certain thing. If I take that backward step, the whole room is illuminated with this little light. I thought about that. I also thought about stepping away. Sometimes the best thing to do, or the best thing for me to do in taking refuge when Buddha arises, when Dharma arises, when Sangha arises, if I'm in something that's puzzling or difficult, to take that backward step helps me see the larger picture maybe I'm too tied up in some little incidental that doesn't really matter. And if I step back a little bit, I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing I thought about was that as I age, instead of looking closely at things like printed material, it's better if I take that back instead. And all of a sudden, things get really clear. And when I was younger, I never thought that things could be clearer the further away I am from that. But I guess with practice and with age, it's part of the wisdom that arises and the farsightedness that arises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Gato. Yeah, I think what gets clear for me also, just the impermanence becomes clear. I think that's what you're talking about too. That everything is changing and we can't really grasp anything. And that it really is, our nature, it's not perceivable or describable in our everyday language. And I like the flashlight because, yeah, you have a flashlight in a dark room, it can shine the light on everything in the room except for itself. It's like our eyes can see the world, but we can't really see the seeing itself because we are the seeing. So we tend not to trust things we can't grasp with our discriminatory consciousness. So that's why we take that backward step so we can open to the possibility and receive the unconditionally accepting nature of our real nature. Yeah, so thanks.
I really enjoyed the prayer of Buddha in my heart and in my mouth and in my ears and my eyes, because I thought, what a wonderful way to start my day is to just think of those things. It puts you in a different mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like it's opening the possibility that our true nature pervades the body. And when we realize that we're much more than the body, it doesn't mean we're disembodied. It just means we can value the body, but be devoted to the source of the body and appreciate the body at the same time.
So I have a question. So what's the difference between refuge versus sheltering? Coming to shelter.
Okay, I couldn't quite get the two words. Difference between what and what?
You use coming to refuge, right? So what is the difference between coming into refuge in Buddha versus shelter?
Was it
Shelter.
fears? Fears? I don't, is that?
Refuge and shelter.
Oh, refuge and shelter. I'm sorry. Well, I guess you would think of shelter as I guess it depends on how you want to define the word. Refuge maybe is something that we can rely on, a trust, something that we can really open our heart fully to. In other words, has anybody ever had any experience that's not here and now? So the here and now of our real being is the one thing that we can always rely on. And it can be a shelter too if we receive that unconditionally accepting aspect of it, that we can not be stained by experience if we learn to be with it and see that it is part of calling for compassion, learning to accept it. So it can be a shelter from our getting lost in our experience and forgetting to look inward, forgetting to remember to take that backward step. So does that answer your question somewhat?
My understanding was both of these English words came from Sanskrit, a Pali word called sharan.
Mm-hmm.
And sharan means when I come into a shelter of Buddha, I leave it up to him to take care of all of my things. So I don't have to put any effort. Right? I'm in his shelter. Or sharan is the Sanskrit word.
Okay.
You use the word refugee. Refuse to me means you escaping something. Right?
Well,
So
yeah.
that's why I get confused. Like you said, 3 jewels, you take refuge in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking shelter, like I'm in this shelter, let him take
Mm-hmm.
care of it, right?
Yeah.
So what is
Well, I think, it's really hard to give a real definitive answer, but engage those questions. It was the spirit of what Reb was saying in this chapter. If we really engage the question, it comes down to what am I? Who am I? Who is the one who wants shelter? Who is the one who wants refuge? What can is there a state of being that is fearless and doesn't fear the suffering of the world? So it doesn't. So that state itself is a refuge, and it is shelter in the sense of being able to not really get lost in suffering. So it's the boundary of what we can accept is the boundary of our freedom. So if we can learn to accept, maybe we don't need shelter or refuge in the traditional sense, but we can be free in our being, whatever happens. And that in itself is a refuge and a shelter both, right? But there's no way to really answer it definitively, but keep that question. It's a good question. Keep engaging, keep asking, keep looking deeply into it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming to the end of our time. Does anyone in the cloud have anything to offer, or anyone in the dirt zendo have anything more to offer? Could the cloud people unmute one by one and say their name and their Dharma name if they have one?
I'm Roger Shika.
Gary Sochi.
Cindy Anderson.
Angela Camargo.
Mallorca.
Walter Halil.
Jason.
Thank you all for sitting with us and practicing with us tonight. Announcements. Watch your emails for announcements of our open house that will be on February 22nd. You'll get all the details in an email, so I won't bore you with them now. Thank you.